looks like it's 10:20. Lauren, you think it's fine if I go ahead and start?
Yeah, I think so. People will come back and turn their cameras on.
Okay.
Already starting.
All right, so I would like to start by introducing Glenda Roberts. So Glenda is the Director of External Relations and Patient Engagement for the University of Washington Center for Dialysis Innovation and the Kidney Research Institute. She is an activist for research and advises on multiple national studies in kidney disease. Her advocacy is focused on addressing patient preferences and improving patient-reported outcomes. And additionally, she's a kidney transplant recipient. So I'm going to let her tell that part of the story herself. And with no further ado, here is Glenda.
Thanks, Sarah. And thanks everyone for giving me an opportunity to share my experience with you. I didn't bring any slides. I decided that you guys will probably slide it out. However, I am going to share one tool that I've used to help me manage my experience with a kidney transplant. About 10 years ago, I was fortunate enough to get a transplant after being on peritoneal dialysis for 6 months and hemodialysis in-center for 6 months. Believe me, getting a transplant was really a blessing and it changed the quality of my life. I should say that I had known that I was diagnosed with kidney disease since I was 21 years old. I just graduated from college and I was about to get my first job. And back in the olden days, before you could get a job, you had to actually pass a physical because they required that all employees have insurance. And because I had too much protein in my urine, they initially said that they were not going to hire me at Shell Oil Company. Girl, I called my mama. I said, I turned down that job in Los Alamos and now Shell's not gonna hire me. She said, girl, don't worry about it, come on home. So I went home to Fort Worth, Texas, and my mother's niece was a teacher in the school system, and she happened to know a white urologist. And this is really important because back in 1970, they didn't have any African Americans that were doing software development. So like I was a real novelty. So, you know, everybody was concerned that maybe something else was going on and maybe I didn't really have kidney disease. So I went to a urologist and he redid the test and he said, I'm going to write you a letter that says I cannot duplicate their test results. I was like, that's cool. And then he said, and as soon as they hire you, you should go on dialysis. I said, what is dialysis? And he really didn't do a very good job of explaining it. You know, this was 1970. So it's possible that he didn't have that much experience, or it's equally possible that he just didn't have time to explain it to me. So I said, what are my other options? He said, you can try diet and exercise. I said, yeah, why don't we go with that? And so I said, what kind of diet should I go on? And he said, a healthy diet. I said, so what constitutes a healthy diet? Now you have to put this in context. At this point, we are in Fort Worth, Texas. Fort Worth, Texas is where the West begins. They are known as Cowtown. They had meat packing plants all over Fort Worth. I mean, that was like one of the primary industries. So that man was not about to tell me to stop eating steaks. But the reality was, when I looked at the options, because once I went to work, I had access to a lot of different resources. And I realized that maybe eating all that beef is not so good for me. So I became a vegetarian. At first I became a vegan, and then I became a vegetarian. And I was able to slow the progression of my disease for more than 40 years using diet and exercise. Now, people always question, how do I know that was the case? And I say, well, my brother was diagnosed with kidney disease at exactly the same age, and he went on dialysis and remained on dialysis for more than 22 years. And he stopped. After 22 years, he just said, that's long enough, I'm gonna die. Like, I am done with this. And my father also died from kidney disease. He lived much longer, but so we have a family history of kidney disease. Now, the important thing is that once I was able to get a transplant, I had a number of side effects that nobody really prepared me for. And we see this a lot in people that get transplants, not just kidney transplant recipients, and that is excessive weight gain. When I went on dialysis in January 2010, I weighed 119 pounds. By the end of, in March of 2010, I weighed 119 pounds because I was on in-center hemodialysis. In March, I went on peritoneal dialysis, and by December, just before I got my transplant, I had gained 35 pounds because there's a lot of dextrose in the peritoneal dialysis. By March of the following year, after taking all the pills in the world, I gained another 35 pounds. And no matter what the physicians did, no matter how we changed my medication, I did half marathons. I have completed over 12 half marathons in the last 10 years, which means I've done a lot of training to do that. I have not lost a pound. And that's one of the things that is pretty common among a lot of transplant recipients. You know, and the thing I have to emphasize is that everybody is unique. You guys know that. But I don't think that anybody prepared me for the dramatic weight gain. Would I have declined the transplant? No. But I do think that it would have made the emotional journey less difficult for me early on in the process. Now, one of the other things that transplant recipients experience commonly is the medication burden. And one of the things that I did after the first year is I took all those pills and I put them in this little box. It's just as many pills as I was taking before, but it made me feel like I wasn't just living to take pills. We found that the medication burden created a strain in my family because, you know, my husband, who has always wanted to be the boss of me and has had little or no success, saw an opportunity. He said, oh yeah, I'm gonna be running her now. And he was constantly asking me, have you taken this medication? What time did you take this medication? How much of this medication did you take? And so because like I wasn't inclined to go along with the program, we came up with a solution that I'd like to share with you. And I apologize that this is not a great image, but when I tried to print it out, it just didn't come through really clearly. We created what's known as the Med Tracker so that it trained me about all of the different medications that I was taking, because every day I would pull out the sheet at the appropriate time, and I have 39 sheets. And I would see, okay, I need to first take this first medication, which is tacrolimus. I take it twice a day. And so every time I took it, I would circle it. I knew when I needed to take it, what it was, what the purpose of it was. And we had other comments on different sheets like, don't take this with grapefruits and, you know, make sure you eat before you take this. But we put these all in a notebook and we both knew where the notebook was. So he never again had to ask me if I had taken a particular medication. But it was also helpful for us because I was taking a lot of different medications at a lot of different times of day. And so, you know, I'm taking some things at 8 and 8, I'm taking some things for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So you had to make sure you were taking all of the right medications at the right time. And this allowed me to have a degree of control over my medications. It allowed me to communicate, but it also prepared me to have a more personalized relationship with my physician. You know, what we talk a lot now about personalized medicine. Everybody, you know, wants to have the right medicine for the right patient at the right time. And when patients are dealing with transplants, they pretty much take a one-size-fits-all approach. You know, they got a list of drugs you take and you all take them at the same time. And if you have a bad experience, then they might change your drug. This tool allowed me to go to clinic visits and go in and say, at this time of day, my legs were swollen with edema. I had just finished taking this medication. I had done that exercise. And so it allowed me to be much more personal in my interaction with my physicians. And I think that's an important thing that I encourage all of you to do with your patients. Get to know the patient. I know you're busy. I know you don't have much time, but find out something about that patient so that you can connect to them and relate with them, because that will help them tell you more about the life experience that they are having. Okay, I'm open for any questions that you have.
Thank you so much, Glenda, for sharing. I'll share a couple of comments that came in through the chat box already. So one is Glenda is awesome, which I think we all agree with.
I love you.
And the next one is from one of the residents who said the med tracker just sounds like a really great idea.
Thank you. We submitted that there's a program called Kidney X that you may or may not be aware of, because there hasn't been a lot of development in kidney disease over the last 50, 60 years. And so Health and Human Services and ASN have gotten together and put together a competition to encourage innovators to come up with new solutions to help people living with kidney disease. And they had a patient challenge so that patients got an opportunity to submit their proposals. And we submitted that because we thought it was useful, not just for people who were transplant recipients, but for anybody that's living with a chronic disease, because there are just so many medications and family members are overwhelmed, one, with your illness, but two, with trying to make sure that you're taking all of the medications, and the medications make you crazy. I don't know if you guys know that, but the drugs y'all give us, like, really make us crazy. And my husband kept saying, do not tell those people that the medications make you crazy, because then they'll be concerned about your ability to manage your transplant. The medications make us crazy. And so I think it helps if you have some tool so that when I'm talking about what my crazy was, you'll be able to look at that tool and better understand what may have contributed to it. I think it's largely prednisone for me, and I have gotten it pretty much under control. But my hypertension medicine makes me crazy too. It also makes me fat, which makes me even crazier. But it is an effective tool, and I'll be glad to share it with any of you so that you can modify it for your patients.
Thank you, Glenda. So next question comes from Molly Kelly. And she asks, can you talk more about what your role as an advocate looks like? And what do patients tell you some of their biggest concerns are that we don't address in the healthcare setting? And
Okay.
then she also adds, thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you. I'll be glad to. First, let me start with what patients tell me, because I think that's probably the most valuable thing that I can share with you now. Okay, so we all know about the phenomenon as doctor as God, right? So patients don't want to tell you anything that is going to upset you, because they don't want you to take away their life-saving therapies, right? And so what I encourage you to do is to try and break down those barriers so that you have more joint decision-making. Patients really do want to understand their illnesses and their diseases, and they really do want to participate in the decision-making process. And while we respect the fact that you are trained and that you understand the body and that you have lots of experience with lots of other patients, every patient is unique. And so to the extent that you can connect with them to understand, even if you learn nothing but they have a dog at home, that tells you a lot about what might be going on in their lives. If they have a cat at home and they have a transplant, then you probably ought to be a little bit concerned about that and either get somebody else to manage the cat or tell them to get rid of the cat, which probably won't go over well. But the point is, to the extent that you can get to know patients and find out things about them, it will help you help them manage their diseases more effectively. Now, in terms of advocacy, I have really been blessed by the kind of support that I have received from the Kidney Research Institute and the Center for Dialysis Innovation, because they have pretty much just let me be me. which is good. I understand that our emphasis is on research. And so I have encouraged, cajoled, and driven the investigators to diversify the people that participate in their research. And this applies to all categories of research. As you know, if you're talking about kidney disease, most of the people with kidney disease are people that look like me. These people in my community have had a bad experience, not only with research historically. You know, we can talk about Tuskegee and Henrietta Lacks, but it goes back much, much farther than that. And we all know that. And we can also talk about recent experiences that people are having with the healthcare and the criminal justice system that all come into play and bias how people perceive their interaction with the healthcare system. So it's really important to try and connect and establish a personal relationship so that you have an opportunity to learn about them and engage with them on a one-on-one basis so that you have a better health experience. And the same is true when we're talking about research. It's important to have a more diverse population of people in the research so that it reflects the people who are suffering with the disease. I've also had a broad national exposure. I am the only patient member of the American Society of Nephrology's COVID-19 response team. They put together a special response team because, as many of you probably know, is that kidney disease is a major side effect of a lot of people that suffer with COVID-19. And so what we found was that not only were we concerned about patients that had kidney disease, we're finding that people who never had kidney disease before are suffering with the side effects of kidney damage as a result of COVID-19. I'm also a member of the NKF and ASN EGFR and race task force. As you know, race in medicine is a big deal right now. If you haven't read the New England Journal of Medicine article, I would encourage you to read it because it focuses not just on race as it relates to nephrology, but race across the board as it is applied in medicine and how that starts to bias people's response, both patient and physician, in terms of how they are involved. And finally, I am the patient advocate for the Center for Dialysis Innovation, where we're developing novel therapies for dialysis treatment. And we have engaged a diverse population of patients, not just in terms of race and ethnicity, but also in terms of age and gender, because a lot of the early research was primarily white men. And we know that the population is more than just white men. And so we have young people. We have one lady who is 23 years old, and we have boomers like me, and we won't go into how old that is. It's just a boomer, okay? So I'm involved in a lot of different organizations: NKF, National Kidney Foundation, the American Association of Kidney Patients, ASN. I'm a member of the Kidney Health Initiative, which is a joint initiative between the FDA and the American Society of Nephrology. And I'm a part of the International Society of Nephrology's Patient Advisory Board, because we understand that transplantation, and especially kidney transplantation, is an issue that is worldwide.
Thank you, Glenda. I have questions that sprung up from everything you said, but I want to make sure all the residents get their questions answered. So one of the next questions comes from James Wykowski, and it's, what was it like making decisions between peritoneal, hemodialysis, and the timing of your transplant?
I had the best nephrologist that I think any other patient has ever had, because Dr. King, who is local to the Seattle area, really tried to prepare me for a preemptive transplant. So we started the process before I needed a transplant. And many transplant recipients don't have that experience. He also had me attend a class at Northwest Kidney Centers that's called Choices. And at Choices, they explained about in-center dialysis, peritoneal dialysis, home hemodialysis, and transplantation, and that all of those were options for me to consider. Many patients don't get an opportunity to attend classes like that, and so they crash into dialysis because many people don't even know that they have kidney disease in advance. So I recognize that my experience is a unique experience. Now, in terms of making the decision about what I would do, we all knew from jump that I was going to be doing peritoneal dialysis because I'm needle phobic. Like when they do biopsies, they do conscious sedation. When I go get my teeth cleaned, they do conscious sedation because like I just don't do needles well. And that was another example of where we customized what we were going to do in terms of my treatment to me as a person. We know that the data says that for hemodialysis, for home hemodialysis, patients have better outcomes than they do even in-center or with peritoneal. But for me, the trade-off was, I'm not going to be able to do all those needles, and I'm definitely not going to be able to do them every day. And because I wanted to live, I said, we should go with peritoneal, and as soon as we could. So I got a catheter. I never got a fistula of any kind. And the other thing that really came into play that nobody ever wants to talk about is those fistulas were deforming your arms. And you know, I like to be getting all dressed up and stuff, and I couldn't see how we were gonna mess up my arms. And even when we got ready to, I did end up crashing into dialysis, even though we were going through the process. I went to the emergency room and they were gonna have to put in a catheter. And this guy comes in and he's like putting this X up on my neck. And I said, what are you doing? He said, well, we're going to put the catheter. I said, I don't think so. I said, because if I live through this, we still need to be cute here, okay? So you cannot be messing up my neck. Girl, got to be getting dressed, you know? And so they actually, and I'm going, because y'all all doctors, y'all seen all this. So what they did is they put, here they are. They put my first catheter here so that when I got ready to go to the Northwest Kidney Center Gala, I put that dress on and I was still hot. And that's important because we minimize the aesthetics of patients, but for some patients, that's really important. And we have to take that into consideration. So it's a long-winded answer, and I told you a whole bunch of things, but I thought they were relevant.
I love that. I'm still smiling. So we have two more questions, some really important ones. So I just want to warn you, so we know that we can cover both of them because I think they're really important. One of them is, how did you get your start in patient advocacy? And I think, you know, that might stem from other patients who are interested in getting more involved and what we can tell them as doctors to help them do so.
I got my start in patient advocacy because when I went to in-center dialysis, I got to know everybody in the dialysis center. I knew all of the techs, I knew all of the nurses, and I also got to know all of the leadership of Northwest Kidney Centers because I wanted to know the people that were making decisions about my health. As a result, I was invited to participate in the African American Kidney Health Fest. I was invited to speak at the Northwest Kidney Center's 50th anniversary as the patient advocate. And that gave me exposure to a number of other physicians who were dealing with kidney disease. And they then started to invite me to participate on studies, which allowed me to go back to work because I retired when I was 52 because I figured I didn't have that much longer. And as a result of that, I got hired to be the executive director for the for the transplant house here in the Seattle area. And while I was going around begging for donations, Jonathan Himmelfarb said, you know what, anybody can do that job you're doing over there. You need to come do this job over here for the Kidney Research Institute because I was already a part of the patient advisory committee. Next question.
All right.
Yeah, I can be succinct.
Thank you, Brenda. I definitely don't want to cut you off. So the next one, again, another thank you for your time. And then a question is, would you be able to talk more about patient perspectives regarding recent changes in EGFR calculations, specifically moving away from race-based GFR?
Yes. So first, let me give you the caveat. I am a member of the ASN-NKF task force that is looking at this question. So the information that I'm about to provide you has nothing to do with our deliberations. This represents what patients have told me and my personal perspective. For those of you who are interested though, we have completed our interim report and it's now going through journal reviews. So you'll be able to get some perspective on where we are, what our thinking is and what our direction is. And the hope is that we'll have the final report by the end of spring. Now, to answer your question, the responses that we've gotten from patients have universally been the same. We had a public forum a few weeks ago where we invited patients to actually come and share with us their perspectives. And across the board, all patients felt like race should be removed, but they felt that race should be removed for a variety of different reasons. As you know, right now, there are two numbers in most organizations. You won't see it at the University of Washington because we have gone to the CKD EPI without race, so you only get one number. But for most institutions, they still get two numbers. They get EGFR if you're African American and another number if you're not African American. But that other number of if you're not African American lumps everybody together. They assume that if you are Hispanic or Asian or whatever else you might be, that number is the same for you if you're Native American. And we know that that is not the case for all people. So what patients want their doctors to do is, one, give them earlier referrals to a nephrologist so that the nephrologist can start to track their personal EGFR and measure and monitor their individual EGFR, because it's different if you're Native American than if you're African American. And if you're like I am, oh, here's a question. What do you guys think I am? Like if you would, okay, this is gonna be a raise your hand, turn on those cameras. Okay, how many of you would say that I am predominantly African American? Raise your hand. Don't be shy. Okay, okay. How many of you would say that I am predominantly something other than African American? Like more than 50% something else? Surprise, surprise. We did my ancestry DNA and the 23andMe test, and it turns out that I am 52% European American, Native American, and a whole bunch of them Europeans. So they must have been tempered out in the slave shacks, okay? Because I got a whole bunch of European stuff going on here. And I am 48% from the African continent. And so when you look at my EGFR, then you wouldn't say that I am predominantly African American, despite the fact that I am clearly African American and of African descent. And so patients are saying that we need to take a more personalized approach to looking at the individual's kidney function and not just their race.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us, Glenda. I am just looking. So there, oh, here we go. Dr. Cho says, I wish we had a whole hour with you, Glenda.
Thank you.
And then I think that covers, and I'm just checking through to make sure I didn't miss anything. There's a couple questions on the specific New England Journal article you were referring to. But
I'll share that with you, Sarah, so you can share it with the group.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been a series of really great articles that have come out. I know the EGFR equation has been a topic of discussion, as all of you know, over the last year or so. And I think we're all learning a little bit more about, one, the repercussions of using such an equation, which I think before we were just kind of said, this is it, and not thought about the end result. And there's a lot more information now that's come out that shows that it really led to lower rates of referrals for kidney transplantation, probably when, they should have been much earlier.
Yes.
The one concern that's been brought up time and time again about if we change things, what will happen is whether less patients will be on medications that they need, because now their GFR is less than 30, and that's often a cutoff. Sometimes a cutoff for clinical trials and cancer research, for lung transplant, and for other medications. There's a really great article that came out. It's a letter to the editor that came out in JAMA by a gentleman with the last name DIAO. There's also an accompanying editorial that's fantastic. But overall, what we've learned is that it's probably what we've been doing is actually probably causing more harm than good. And so I think for the science-minded and the people who just want to know, are we doing the right thing now by switching? It seems like we actually are doing the right thing by taking race out in terms of patient outcomes.
So I'm going to be neutral in my response to your comment, but the one thing that I would recommend is that we look at doing earlier referrals when we think that people might be moving in the direction of kidney failure. And that will give nephrologists an opportunity to be more personalized in their approach for an individual to determine what the individual's measured kidney function, or GFR, is.
And Dr. Cho just put the article in the chat box. Thank you. And
Thank you.
And honestly, the editorial's really good too. All right, we still got a few more minutes before Dr. DeCastro comes on. So if anyone has any last burning questions for Glenda.
I want to make a plug just for Glenda's work. I mean, she has done such amazing work here at the Kidney Research Institute and through the Center for Dialysis Innovation and through all of her work nationally. And I just want to recognize her. I mean, she's received national level awards, including awards from the National American Association of Kidney Patients, which is the largest kidney patient organization in the country. She looks like she's got it on her wall there. And she's helping us all improve the quality of our research from the patient's perspective. And as many of you know, many of the funding agencies are encouraging, if not requiring, patient engagement from the earliest stages of research now, which we believe in. And Glenda's been critical in that aspect of the work as well. So thank you, Glenda.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Sorry, I muted. It looks like we can have a little 5-minute break, and then we'll come back at 11 to hear from Dr. DeCastro. We're getting a lot of thank yous right now in the chat box, Glenda. So if you want to pull it up and see them, go for it.
Thank you. That makes me feel great. I really appreciate it. This is really, when in the early part of my career, and I'll say this as in a closing comment, in the early part of my career, one of the things that I used to say, because I'm from the South, just so you know, and I used to say, so God, is this work that I'm doing like really meaningful? It was very lucrative financially, but I kept saying, am I really doing something that's good for humanity? Like, how are people benefiting from the work that I'm doing? Be careful what you ask for, because then you'll get kidney disease and you'll have an opportunity to advocate on behalf of patients. So thank you very much. And if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me at glendar@uw.edu. Thank you. Bye-bye.